We're back. I can't believe it. It's been, what, 2 years, 3 years, something like that? You were a listener. You weren't even an employee of Kabuki back when we had Strength Chat last, if that's...
I think I just started on when it was kind of like the last episode.
Yeah. It was late 2019, early 2020, something like that. Yeah. Got a little business, just busy, distracted. You know, the world does that with business sometimes, but excited to be back. And what better way than starting it out with our Chad, our friend, with our Chad, with our friend Chad Wesley Smith of Juggernaut. What more iconic guest can you have than one of the most respected strength coaches in the industry? So welcome to the show, Chad. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here. Thanks for the esteemed introduction there.
Yeah. We got well, I was kind of thinking about that this morning. We get the bio at the beginning of the show, and I'm like, does on a show like Strength Chat, does a name like Chad really even need like an intro or bio? It's like the name's pretty synonymous with that. So, but here we are. Now, Chad, I wouldn't say recently, but I know for a number of years you struggled with some back injuries, and then had, which basically kept you, out of that sport of powerlifting for a while. Obviously, you participate in a number of different disciplines, but you had surgery, and then you had a comeback meet with Marissa in 2020. What was that like? Getting back, on the platform, and after that lumbar spine surgery. Can you walk us through that? Tell us a little bit about it and the recovery. I'm really interested in.
Yeah. So the full but short version is I was first aware of my herniated discs in 2013. The start of 2013, I did in January my first pro strongman show after winning nationals in 2012 and getting my pro card. Then in last weekend of February, first weekend of March, went to the Arnold Squad 700 for 10 in the animal cage. Then about 3-4 weeks after that, did a powerlifting meetup at Super Training. Then about 4 weeks after that, did a Giants Live qualifier strongman show out in Vegas with Nick Best. And then 4 weeks after that, did another full power meet out in Kentucky, where I actually made, at the time, a total PR, 2171. And then I was, so that was, obviously 5 competitions, 4 competitions and a big exhibition in the first 5 months of the year. And then I was starting my training for the Capo meet, which was kind of the first, let's get a bunch of strong guys over in Australia trend.
Yep.
So I was maybe 3-4 weeks into training for that and doing a set of 5 deadlifts, and I pulled the first one. I'm like, oh, that hurt. Second one, oh, that hurt even more. And by the 5th one, I finished the set, and I get to the lockout, and I just kind of drop the bar, and like the wind goes out of me, and felt like I got kicked in the nuts, tased in the spine, all at the same time. So I already had an appointment with my chiro PT guy right after. So, I finished the training, actually, it was all this accessory stuff, and get over there. And by the time I'd cooled down a little bit, adrenaline had worn off, I'd had to sit in the car to drive over there. Now I'm moving really slow. So I had to go the next day to Chicago to teach a seminar for a couple days. But then I came back, got MRI. I had, I think, a 7mm and 5mm herniations in L4, L5, L5S1. Rehab that, no surgery, nothing, didn't have insurance or money for surgery at that point anyway. So rehab it, and then come back in 2014, my first meet back, squat 937, total 2248. So all of my kind of probably most notable powerlifting meets were post these disc herniations. So 2314, 2325 totals, all my biggest squats and deadlifts. So in 2016, I did a Big Dogs meet, and I knew going in that was going to be the last powerlifting meet I did or planned to do. I had been planning that, like even the GPA Worlds meet that we were at together in Australia. I think I probably figured that was going to be my last meet, and I had about four meets that I planned to be my last meet, and then they weren't. But at that time, I just decided, I'm happy to get to have accomplished what I accomplished in powerlifting, to not have any surgery scars at the time, and then to kind of move on with the business and my life. And that actually had been my plan for a long time in powerlifting.
Yeah, I remember us like walking down the street. It was late at night, like to get some burgers and fries down there in Australia, and having almost this very same conversation. And you were at a point you were very like, I'm good with this. Like I did what I need to do, and I'm excited for driving the business and moving the stuff forward. I remember that.
Yeah. So I'd always said, I want to get out at 30 with no surgery scars. So I was a little bit after 30, and some bumps and bruises, but no surgery scars. So at that point, I shift, just focus on the business for most of 2017. Start doing jiu-jitsu at the end of 2017, and train and just having fun. Lift a little bit, train some jiu-jitsu, get much more into the competitive side of jiu-jitsu, especially in 2019. So end of 2018, like December 2018, and I'm back training hard again, and I actually had it in my mind, like, maybe I'm going to do another meet. But I didn't want to tell anyone. I just wanted to, like, do all the training, and then if I was ready, I'd hop in and do it. And, turned out to be a good thing that I didn't tell anyone, because I got an umbilical hernia there, so surgery for that. So that's January 2019, first surgery. I was like, okay, well, I guess that was a sign. Powerlifting's not it. So I'm competing in jiu-jitsu that year, doing Pan Ams and Worlds, and having fun and doing well with that. And then wake up one morning after normal-ish training in, let's say, end of July, August 2019, when I was in some of the best shape of my life. I was down to like 280. I was lifting pretty well, like squatting 600 for reps. I was running stadiums and training jiu-jitsu 5-6 days a week. And I wake up and I'm numb from ass cheek to big toe on my right leg, just debilitating sciatic pain, which I'd never had with my herniated discs before.
Yep.
It was so that was totally new, and like I was dragging my right foot. I couldn't push off couldn't get my right heel a centimeter off the ground. So 2 epidural shots later in late 2019, and I'm like, all right, back training jiu-jitsu. Started 2020. I had back-to-back weeks. One, just this little training injury. That's as straight as that goes. And then I had a match the next week against Nsima Inyang, jiu-jitsu match, and then ruptured a tendon in this thumb, so opposite hands. Ruptured the tendon in this thumb, so they had to put a pin in this, all this stuff. So, between that, like 2 bad hands, bad back, I think I got my thumb surgery like 2 days before everything got shut down for COVID. 2020, mostly a wash, but then at the end of 2020, all right, I'm back training again, training jiu-jitsu. Everything's feeling fine. And then it's like, my back feels a little rough. And then the next one, it feels a little bit worse. To the point where I get from New Year's, or December 31st, New Year's Eve, but during the day, it's not a party-related injury. From then, for the 2 weeks,
my New Year's party related injuries are lifting, because that's what I like doing on New Year's, by the way. So
yeah. So I was doing this consult at a school up here, and I told Marissa, I was like, I need you to drive me. I can't sit down to drive. So I'm like reclined in the passenger seat and just sweating with pain, and this sciatic just nonstop firing. It's making my nuts hurt. It was all bad. So a couple of days prior to that, I was like, all right, this is getting bad. I need to get this surgery. But being right at the end of the year, they're like, yeah, we can't get you until next year. And then we got to wait for new insurance to kick in and all that BS. So from that day, December 31st, 2020, until I had surgery on, I think, January 13th, 2021, I was essentially bedridden. I couldn't stand for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time. The way I described it is like, as soon as I would stand up or sit down, actually, it was like a little, egg timer, like sand dial timer flipped over, and every grain of sand that would come out with time, every grain of sand was pain and fire.
Right.
And it was just filling my leg up until it was full, and I was hopefully back laying down at that time, or I was pretty damn just like falling down. So anyways, get the surgery, and at that point I was like, all right, I want to get back. I want to be able to train jiu-jitsu. I want to be able to play golf with my buddies. I want to, lift. Okay, I'll just belt squat and I'll bench and stuff. So that's what I was doing for most of pretty much all of 2021 once I got through kind of the early stage rehab process. But it was definitely, in my rehab plan, I had my exercises from the PTs and my buddies who do all that stuff. It was kind of just collaborative, them and me doing it together. And I had my golf rehab plan. I was like, all right, this week you can chip up to 30 yards, then that's for 10 days. Then we go to 60 yards. Like, this is how hard you can swing. And go ahead.
I want to comment on it. There's a bunch of questions that keep popping up on psychological factors and other stuff that I want to dive into. But there's just something I really want to highlight there that's really important as people are working through both the rehab process and particularly back rehab. Is what you're doing there is tempering the other things outside of your training as it relates to this, right? The influence of that volume, that movement, those other things in people so much, especially when they're dealing with something that's been ongoing like yourself, that's been dealing with this for years, trying to get through this. It's popped up, I've affected this. And as soon as you start feeling better to go, you know what, I'm going to have some fun and just play golf you're ready to just, and then it sets you back. And the fact that you're so purposeful with managing those, that hobby aspect, the thing, that piece is, I just wanted to highlight that, make sure, there's a few seconds there, but that's a few seconds of really great importance for anybody that's walking through sort of any injury or recovery, because it's so easy to go, I'm there, and this stuff takes time. It takes so much time, and the instant you feel better is not the time to go, yay, I've got it all, let's just go run. So anyway, I wanted to just interrupt and highlight that.
For sure. And I think that idea of, like a graded exposure is really helpful for people to understand. And even going back to my first, rehab bout with these herniated discs, I took about 6 months to get back to what I would say was regular training. Like, I am lifting real weights now. And could I have done that in 3 months? Probably. 4 months for sure. But for me, my oldest brother has had a bunch of back issues, 3 microdiscectomies and a spinal fusion. So to see the struggles that he had with that prior to me having any back issues, I was like, what he's dealing with is not worth it to me. So I'm going to take 6 months. I'm going to take as long as it needs. And, I often give people the advice, and it's easy to give and harder to take, but like, you're better off, delaying the next step by a month than you are by going back too early back to it by 1 day. And, maybe that's a problematic thing from a pain psychology standpoint. And it's like, oh, it's always going to be there. But I've had too many friends, powerlifters that you and I both know, who they come back too fast because of it being tied into ego or identity or whatever. And they set this, artificial timeline of, I want to do this by 6 months or 9 months. And instead of just, I'm going to do this when I'm ready, and, maybe it goes pretty well for 6 months, but then there's a setback. And then it goes pretty well for the next 3 months, but then there's a setback. And this process that could have been, all said and done in a year, maybe, ends up taking 2 years, 3 years. It never is.
It never gets there. Yeah. You touch on some important points there, because there is a lot of argument and kickback, on the other side around pain science, right? On some of these topics about, expectations, and that, we're creating a nocebo where, when we're talking about some of these steps. But at the same time, the audience that we talk to is a different audience, right? And it's almost a competition to go, hey, how fast can I get back from this, right? And I can't say that I'm a great role model, because I do recover and have done that many times very fast. But, that's my profession. That's what I focus on is, rehab. And I just think it's really important just in our industry as a whole, because you even see it like in the female world. We see this so oftentimes too, like, hey, it's a competition to get your, before baby body back after having a baby, or all these. And it's like, no, it's what are you ready for? What is your body ready and capable for of? And it could be vastly different timelines for different individuals. And what your needs are and understanding your life and your lifestyle and your priorities, right? And you're 100% spot on that, like, that I think in our environment, again, this isn't the gen pop environment. So, those, the physios, the, claiming nocebo and all that, like, that's a real thing. And we need to respect that. But that's to an audience that may be afraid of movement or loading, not the audience that's pushing it too far, too fast. Mm-hmm. And so those are some important topics I think worth addressing. And I really appreciate your mindset and approach here. And actually knowing that your brother walked through this is definitely gives you, because I see you're very thoughtful and about where am I at with the rest of my life, not just my lifting, right?
Certainly. Yeah. And the lifting part for me at this point, similar to our conversation, which would have been like 2015 in Australia, like I'd squatted 970, I'd pulled over 800, I'd made these big totals. It's like,
do I have anything else to prove?
Yeah, it's like, I'd see a comment once in a while, like on Instagram, like, does Chad even lift anymore? I was like, no, but
no.
The rest of y'all keep going for the rest of your life, and we'll see if you match what I did there. So when there was a bit of a shift towards like, all right, I want to lift heavy, and it's a very relative term, heavy again. Marissa was working with a PT out of Australia named Pei Bokenfuso, who's the IPF lifter for Australia in Marissa's weight class. And Pei was helping me with some rotational stuff, but it was all related to golf and jiu-jitsu. And then she just kind of asked, she's like, you want to lift heavy again? I was like, no, it's not really interesting to me. And part of that reason is because I'm like, I'm not going to, I know I'm not going to lift, I'm not going to squat 900 or something again, because that's just not in my goals. But it's like, is doing 600 or 700 like going to bring me some sort of personal satisfaction? And I was like, I just don't know if it would. But anyways, she commented, she's like, I don't think it would be too tough to get you back. And I was like, all right, bet. Let's see what you got here. So the stuff that she did that was really helpful for me, and Pei's kind of two main populations she works with are powerlifters and the Australian national diving team. And she said, divers get overly specific towards flexion and internal rotation, and powerlifters get overly specific towards extension and external rotation. So she's like, I give the divers powerlifting type of stuff and the powerlifters diving type of stuff. I'm oversimplifying it, of course,
but theoretically, conceptually, yeah.
Yeah. So reintroducing the ability to control flexion, to control internal rotation, and then just reintroducing more rotation. Because I went from my track and field background, throwing the shot put and being athletic and moving in all kind of different planes, to 8-9 years of powerlifting and just going up and down, forward and backwards, and then kind of just cannonballed back in on the jiu-jitsu and golf side of things with a bunch of rotation. Jiu-jitsu's got all kind of like quote unquote bad positions of flexion and rotation being combined and that type of stuff, with under quite a bit of load. But so as she helped me kind of control that stuff back, I just started slow. I had still been belt squatting and stuff the whole time, so it's not like my legs had become weak. But I think part of the reason why I had the sciatica stuff start so hard back in 2019 was I was belt squatting for a lot of that time after the hernia, because I was like, I don't want to stress the hernia. So my legs were still strong. And then when I went back to putting the bar on my back, there was a little weak link in the chain there, and I just ramped it up. I tried to be really conservative. Right. I started back squatting in 2019 at 100 kilos for 5x5. And then probably, I went like 100, 120, 140, 160, 180. So over the course of however many weeks that was, like 20 kilo jumps a week. Then I did the 180 for 5x5, and I was like, all right, we can just start training again. And then it was like 2 weeks later, I did, 260 by 5, and it was a little, if I took 10 weeks, I probably would have been fine if I took 12 or 13, but it was just a little too fast. So I was determined to not make that mistake again, for the more than second or third or fourth time in my life. And so just started slow, probably really focused on like, all right, I'm gonna try and lift what is now for me heavy again, probably right about January 1st of 2022. And that had its ebbs and flows with life and travel and everything. Like, it was going pretty good. And then we went to South Africa for IPF Worlds for Marissa, and then on a safari. And then I got COVID when I came back. So it was like, making good progress. And then it's like, okay, well, 3 weeks off, and then let's almost restart. But yeah, so I just did this garage gym competition, squatted 705, pulled 661, 300 kilos. So it was nothing groundbreaking, but it was crazy because for me, like, doing those numbers, squatting 705, which I think at probably my peak powerlifting shape, in sleeves, I bet I could have squatted 705 for 15. And like, thinking about doing it for one, like, that shit was keeping me up at night, for the couple days leading into it. And the pull, the deadlift really even more so. Like 2 weeks before the garage gym competition, I missed 300 kilos. So I pulled it to my knees and I put it down and just looked at Marissa. I was like, I'm scared. I'm scared to do it because, is on the other side of this rep, on the other side of that second or two or three of straining through the middle portion of that lift, is not being able to stand up for 2 or 3 minutes on the side of that, is another surgery, is something even worse than that. Like, it was so tough to wrap my mind around. And then I'm thinking, like, I'm being like silly, like, these are easy weights, I've done these a ton before, but it was a lot of internal dialogue even that day. And I was like, opener felt a little bit harder than I was expecting it to. Like, maybe this is a bad idea, but it worked out all good. And I really haven't been having any, be a little stiff here or there, especially like if I lift hard in the morning, do jiu-jitsu at night. But for the most part, my back feels as healthy as it did 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand how challenging that is. So there's kind of a couple things actually that I'd like to get your input on. So I had a really bad back injury back in 2017, 2018, where I was on crutches. I had to wear a back brace, and that happened for about a year. And I remember the doctors being like, okay, so you can't stand for very long, you can't lay down, you can't sit down, you can't have sex, you can't, like, literally couldn't do anything. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And they're like, you'll figure it out. And so I had to, like, hang for every 30 minutes, I had to hang for like 30 seconds or a minute, like on a pull-up bar, just to help kind of decompress my spine. And there was like all this stuff. And it's not just that it affects your training, it affects everything about you and your capacity and your confidence in like to do anything really, because the idea that you're going to go from this person who's training all the time, who has this sort of physical freedom, and into this completely different individual who now your lifestyle is completely disrupted, and that's somehow not going to impact your business, your relationships, your general psychology. That's a very tough transition. So I would love to hear your feedback on, I guess, some of the strategies that you use to get you through that. And then the other thing that I'd like to get a comment on would be just sort of touching on the difference in transition of going from a powerlifting background into jiu-jitsu, because that's one thing that I also think people who don't have a multi-sport background maybe aren't necessarily familiar in. So when I went back to boxing again, I used to be a high-level boxer, switched over to powerlifting. I'm like 120 pounds heavier. I just go to throw a little hook, and I wasn't used to it. I tore my oblique because I just wasn't used to generating that type of force in that sort of rotational plane. And I mean, I'm sure a guy like you, you're obviously way, way stronger than me. And so someone who can squat that much going into jiu-jitsu, where you're putting in these really odd positions where you're kind of extended and you don't really have good leverage necessarily, I do feel like there's a potential increased risk of injury just because your level of fitness is so high, if that makes sense. And so navigating how you would kind of approach that exposure as well to make sure you can kind of mitigate some of that risk.
Yeah. So on the first part of that, the psychology piece, like coming back to lift the weights, I don't know that I have great answers there, that, I'm doing it effectively enough for myself, really just through a combination of, kind of visualization, positive self-talk, and like trusting, like, all right, well, you did, this weight for this reps, and that translates to this, so you're ready to do it. Like you're years of experience doing this for yourself and thousands of other people tells you you're ready to do it. And just sort of trusting that. But I mean, I was like feeling like I was, one moment I'd have this visualization in my head of like, you know, standing the weight up and it feels strong and it's smooth and easy. And then the next minute there's that visualization's getting like taken over by like just fucking crumbling and you know, it was really like an internal fight for that I, you know, I think you just got to keep drawing the good one in and seeing it over and over and over. You know, on the sport transition side of things, like I first became involved in jiu-jitsu pretty much as soon as we started Juggernaut, back in late 2009. One of my first clients was more or less from a cold call, a guy named Fabio Vilela, 6'7", 250-pound black belt, just moved here from Brazil. And through him, I got the opportunity to coach, maybe 7 black belt world champions. We'd have a group with like 12 to 15 black belts, guys traveling from Brazil, across the U.S., Europe, who'd be here before, you know, for the weeks leading up to Pan Ams and Worlds. So, you know, Southern California is kind of just the hub of jiu-jitsu in America. And those guys would always be, hey, Coach Chad, you got to train, you got to smash everybody. And, you know,
that is a really good Brazilian accent. That's actually really spot on.
You know, at the time, this was like 2010, 11, 12, I was doing powerlifting, competing in strongman. I was like, I can't risk, you know, hurting my shoulder and my elbow, whatever. But I trained maybe 2 times back then and never really thought anything of it. So powerlifting finishes. So when I go through most of 2017, just focused on the business, training very intermittently, like lifting very intermittently, like 1 or 2 days a week. And I was like, all right, I need a change. So, you know, kind of light bulb pops. I was like, what about those jiu-jitsu guys? And I hadn't seen them in a couple of years. And we've just been focused, pretty much all the business has been focused on powerlifting and weightlifting. So I hit up one of our guys, Felipe de la Monica, this gentleman right there. And he runs Gracie Baja headquarters here in Irvine. So the North American headquarters, which Gracie Baja has, I think as of last week, 1,007 schools worldwide and like 150,000 students or something. So he's important. He coached a bunch of you know, TJ Dillashaw, Rafael Dos Anjos, Swanson, a lot of pro MMA fighters. And so I walk in there, 365 pounds, out of shape, you know, not even by my standards really that strong anymore. I was about a year out from my last powerlifting meet where, you know, so I wasn't squatting 950 type of numbers. I was probably maybe could have done 750 then, and you know, just getting gassed by the warm up and so yeah, I mean, grand scheme, squatting 750, probably pull 700 or so then, and bench like 450. Still capable of a lot more force production, but you know, Philippe he knew me really well, and we'd known each other for 12 years now, and he just told me, he's like, just train like you're weak, you know, like try and make it as smooth and effortless as possible. And, you know, so I would do that. I think I took that advice to heart and knew that I'm going to learn the technical side of things faster, you know, by trying to really flow through it. And, you know, because I have a pretty big athletic background with football, track and field, all that stuff, like, you know, I was generally a lot more athletic than most powerlifters. But where the big mistake that I made, and I think what probably led to the back issues coming in 2019 and 2020, was there just wasn't a concerted effort for me to like give graded exposure to these new movement patterns. It was just train jiu-jitsu. And was I training that hard? No. But to go from, you know, 2010 to 2017 with, you know, very little rotation, very little, you know, intentional controlled flexion, and then put some of it in, a lot of it in at times, and do it when you get really fatigued and you're not, you know, mindful of these positions and stuff, was a little bit too much. So, you know, if someone was wanting to make that transition, I mean, you can only control so much of what's going on the mats. So it's going to be, kind of, all right, don't go from 0 days of jiu-jitsu and then you start doing 5 days a week because you get in, you love it. And, and that's great. But it's like train 2 days a week for a couple of weeks and then 3 days a week for a couple of weeks. And then, you like force yourself to hold yourself back, do stuff on the other days if you're just chomping at the bit so much to get in there.
And adjust your other training at the same time, right?
Certainly.
Like, yeah, and understand it's not just skill acquisition.
Yeah.
Like there is loading that's going on here, right? And that's very different loading.
Yeah, it's tough for like lifters, strength coaches, sometimes I think to quantify, things that you can't measure with on a barbell or a stopwatch or even a force plate or something like that. But, you're fighting against the force and resistance of another person. It's as much, if not more, probably, training just more difficult to quantify. So, if you're getting into bigger planning about like, all right, today's going to be a high stress jiu-jitsu day and we're going to consolidate the stressors of our training in these different ways. I'm just going to give like a simply actionable one. 2 days, 3 days, like 2 days for 3 weeks and then 3 days for 3 weeks and create some sort of structure to that. And if on the other days you want to do something like a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu do what's called gymnastica natural, which is like very, very hard to do, like yoga calisthenics type of routine with like some specific type of jiu-jitsu movement patterns. And especially for like a big guy, like it's fucking hard. and I'll be sweating my ass off after 10 minutes of gymnastica natural, but a lot of good like ways to begin preparing your body. So including that kind of stuff and adjusting your lifting training. Like for me, when I started jiu-jitsu, I was like, if I lift twice a week, that's fine. Like I think I was probably a lot different than lots of powerlifters, and I find almost none of my identity wrapped up in being a powerlifter. Like my job is talking about lifting on the internet, and I competed in powerlifting, but I would have never been like, yes, I'm Chad Wesley Smith, powerlifter. And my friends like that I interact with on a day-to-day, none of them compete in powerlifting. Like they're lawyers and doctors and stuff, and they're just like, you see Chad lift all that weight? That was fucking crazy,
Yeah. I think that's an important distinction that a lot of athletes as a whole, but definitely very much in the powerlifting, is not letting yourself get defined by what you do and understanding it is an expression of the things that you want to do in the world. Like, hey, I want to be physically active. I want to have challenge or competition. I want to because like, it can get taken from you. And you have to figure out some other thing. And if that is the definition of yourself, that's where we see people really struggle, right?
Yeah. Powerlifting it was always just a sport that I did. I think.
Well, you've done a lot of sports.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed it, and it's been great, and we made it into a career. But yeah, I never felt defined by it in really any way. So it's never been a tough thing for me to be like, all right, I'm going to lift less. It's like lifting is hard. There's a lot of times where I don't want to do it. Jiu-jitsu was new and fun, so it was easy enough. But yeah, important for people to understand whether it's in making that transition or the bigger context of planning their training. That we use that Charlie Francis analogy of like the nervous system as a cup, and every stress you're imposing on it, so you're filling that cup up to a varying degree. And the more stressful it is, the more you fill the cup up, and the cup overflows. And now we're into overtraining and all that stuff. And you have to quantify things without a barbell or without a stopwatch as training and stress, and know that when it's new, it's even more. It's going to count even more. So when you're pouring more from the jiu-jitsu cup, you got to pour a little bit less from the lifting cup.
It's interesting because it's like you can actually quantify those things to some level, right? And I'm not suggesting anyone do this, but it's like you could take a jiu-jitsu session, let's say it's 90 minutes, and film it and go, how many times am I, doing rotational moves? How many times am I in these different extending through my hips, doing a stand up. Like, what is that? And then you can also apply your subjective measures, your RPE, to handle intensity, right? And, a sports performance, specialist would typically actually do that, like, let's film a hockey match and understand, like, what are the actual demands, the real demands during the course of a game or course of a practice. And I'm not suggesting anybody do that to figure out your own training plan, right? But to having some contextual idea of, like, you can do that, I think can help people understand the graphs just instinctually with giving it a little bit of thought of, like, what are the demands on this? How am I walking away from this workout? Am I just, like, spent? And how much, like, oh, wow, I did 300 reps of freaking working my obliques, maybe I should consider that into my training.
Yeah, the time motion analysis stuff in jiu-jitsu would be a very interesting project because it's so much, it can be so different from one match to the next or one practice to the next.
Yeah.
And so like even in our one of our apps, Juggernaut BJJ app, we do some tracking of the jiu-jitsu sessions, but it's really just time, number of live rolls, and then an RPE rating. And that is something that, I work with a lot of jiu-jitsu guys and MMA fighters. They do a terrible job, like the sports as a whole, terrible job of quantifying the training, of having some understanding of, like, today was hard, today was easy. Why? What did I do? Take note of this. This is hard. So if I want to have a medium, intensity session, I'm going to take that hard one and reduce it by this much, kind of thing. Because then you get into different opponents. Like, you show up and now I got to roll with this guy, and this is going to be way harder. Yeah. I wasn't really planning on this, or it just goes a different style. But yeah, there certainly is ways to more and less accurately quantify it. But yeah, people being mindful of just like, this is going to be a hard session. Like when I was competing more in like 2019, started 2020, I would have a kind of high-low schedule set up like that, where I knew, all right, Monday night I'm going to do advanced class. Tuesday I'm going to go to just the fundamentals. Like, so Monday is going to be a high, Tuesday is going to be low. Wednesday I go to this competition class, that's going to be high. Thursday, is going to be just a recovery day. I'm going to get an ice bath through that. Friday I've got a private, so maybe a medium day. Saturday competition class. Sunday off, and creating some ebbs and flows to the stressors there. Because I see it with pro MMA guys who have been, training for their whole life.
How are you maximizing going into a competition that you have if you don't have some level? So yeah, let's dive into that and what you're doing with your app as it relates to both strength training as other disciplines, and being able to, because I'm really interested in, your use of AI. You use AI as well as one-on-one coaching. What's the differentiation there? What value, are you bringing? And then, like, how are you looking at this stuff? Wow, that's a lot of questions. Let's just, I was about to put 3 more in there too, but let's start there.
Yeah. So, with our app, Juggernaut AI app, it's an expert system artificial intelligence. So it's aiming to recreate the decision-making process of an expert. I am said expert in that process. So it's really based on bringing people individualized training. So through like scientific principles of strength training that, work on with Dr. Israel, and do all these seminars. Now, the seminars we talk about, all right, what is affecting the volume that you need and can likely tolerate. So we'd explain in a seminar, all right, women tend to be able to tolerate more volume than men, and if you're taller, probably not as much as a shorter person, and as you get stronger, you're going to have all your training is going to be more stimulating, more fatiguing than when you're not lifting as high absolute loads. And explaining to them, all right, this is raising your MEV and MRV, this is lowering it. If you get bad sleep, it's bringing them, raising MEV and lowering MRV, and so on and so forth, with all these individual differences. But I'd finish, a 2-hour presentation on this, and then, so what is my MRV though? Like, you told me all the how to find it, but can you just tell me mine? And I was like,
right.
Well,
And for our audience that doesn't know MRV, MEV,
Yeah,
So
minimum effective volume,
yep.
maximum recoverable volume, and then so we've the whole thing. We've an MV maintenance volume, MEV minimum effective volume, MAV maximum adaptive volume, and then MRV maximum recoverable volume. So, the bulk of the training is going to hopefully happen in that MAV, which lives between MEV and MRV. So, after being asked enough times in seminars and YouTube comments and Instagram Q&As, well, what's my number? Like, I was like, all right, I'm gonna make a way to find this. So I started, just kind of working on this chart, just like a magnitude of like, all right, if females are going to be plus 4 sets compared to males, and then height and weight and all this stuff, and then with each having its own magnitude assigned to it, and then just putting test cases in and refining those numbers, and like, all right, this is giving these people the right numbers. This is making really productive training for them. So that system also informed a lot of other aspects of the way that I coach powerlifting, and it was a very interesting kind of mental exercise for me to do this stuff, because some of it I was doing without realizing necessarily why I was doing it. But then
just the art of coaching, like you've got that innate skill, and it's like, okay, now let's sit down. Why do I make this decision? And
that was kind of the case for me through a lot of even doing scientific principles of strength training with Mike. He's got his PhD in sport physiology. My degree is in history. I
pretty much the same thing.
I very intentionally in college didn't get like an exercise physiology degree, just because the school I was at didn't have a good one. And I came up, reading a lot of like Elite FTS and West Side type of stuff, where there was this messaging of like, Americans don't know how to teach strength coaches kind of thing. And I was really big in that stuff. So I took it to heart, and I was like, no, I'm not. Why? I'm just learning under the iron, brother. I don't need to. So I actually did a little bit of independent study, like course type of stuff, because I was coaching high school football and track while I was in college, while I was competing in track. So I, write some papers for this independent study stuff for the exercise physiology department, and I handed it into the head of the department, and he, gives it back to me a couple days later, and he's like, this isn't your major? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, you're a lot better at this than the people who are majoring. And I was like, and that's why I'm not majoring in it with you, because of that exact reason. So a lot of the stuff with Mike, like even phase potentiation or whatever, like things that he was putting these terms to, I was like, oh yeah, I do that like this, and I never had a name for it. this is how we did it. So it was like this great mental exercise. I was like, I can't, when Tim, our CTO, is coding this app, the rules can't be because that's the way that I do it. It doesn't know that.
Right.
I need justification, and I need real planning behind every part of it. And part of the way that when I'm like making a YouTube video or something is I'm trying to anticipate essentially what is YouTube troll commenter going to try and find fault in, and I'm going to head that off at the pass before I allow it to happen.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the effort going through all that stuff. And then as we've been able to put, more and more athletes in there, we currently have just shy of 10,000 active monthly users in the Juggernaut AI app. We've been getting so much more feedback and data, and being able to continually, refine those numbers and see what works best.
Yeah, that's awesome, having such a great pool to refine that. And you've been doing this, how many years ago did you release the app?
2 years ago, the app was released. Yeah. There was some spreadsheet versions of related stuff prior to that, but the way that it works now, the two aren't particularly related. So
yeah. And are you feeding that into, like I said, beyond just the the powerlifting aspect? So you mentioned you've got a BJJ one.
Mm-hmm.
Is the same principles in that AI like feeding, the workouts in there?
Or the BJJ one is certainly not nearly as robust as the powerlifting one. Really, and a big part of that is because the training that they're doing, it's just strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu. is so supplementary to their whole training, and the jiu-jitsu crowd as a whole. Like I said, I've been working with jiu-jitsu athletes since 2009. A lot of black belts, a lot of guys competing at world championships have zero strength and conditioning background, have never lifted weights before. So one that, there's not going to be nearly the variance in training volumes that they're dealing with from a lifting standpoint as if we had a 19-year-old 50-kilo female, what her training is going to be looking like after she's been training for a year versus a 308-pound class male lifter who's been training for 20 years. One guy could be squatting for 3 or 4 work sets a week, and the girl might be doing 20 sets a week. Where in the jiu-jitsu app, the parameters are way smaller. Just because there's not that, no one's going to be on the super high volume, and then you got to be doing something, so the volume only gets so low. So instead of that 4 to 20 or 25 range in a week, it's more like a 2 to 6 kind of range. So the parameters are constrained a lot. Because the exercise selection for powerlifting can be so significant in addressing different weak aspects of a lift, but in jiu-jitsu, I don't really care what exercise they do. You like to do front squats, you like to do safety squat, bar squats, you like to box squat, go for it.
Whatever. We're just going to add some strength on top of your technique that you've already got. It does the specificity of it, as long as it's within this general realm, doesn't matter.
Yeah, when I'm looking at exercise selection for sport performance, and that's really my background. Most people know me as a power lifter. When we started Juggernaut in 2009, it was sport performance coaching. I was still doing track. I wasn't doing powerlifting until late 2010, and even for that 2010, 11, 12, it was all sport performance coaching. I didn't train powerlifters in person. We were not a powerlifting gym. We were a sport performance gym that I did powerlifting at.
So that's actually a really unique, I guess, kind of jumping off point, because you have had such a varied experience in coaching athletes from a variety of different sports. One of the things that I'm curious about is what sort of characteristics you've noticed in athletes that sort of tend to push them to a really high level. Now, obviously, there's potential survivorship bias where people have that and maybe don't make it, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I've been, I think, very unique probably in the powerlifting world, but in the coaching world in general. I've got NFL players, professional MMA fighters, Olympians in track and field, shot put, hammer throw, done consulting stuff for USA track and field, UK track and field, UCLA track and field, sprinters, multi-event athletes, throwers, NFL teams, all that stuff, plus all the powerlifting, strongman type of stuff that Juggernaut is more known for. So there are certainly a lot of commonalities between these athletes that become really successful. I think one of the greatest traits, and I'm assuming you're talking more mental traits than physical.
Yeah,
it's is a accountability for their own actions. That that they understand that they are the one who does the work. They are the one who creates the result. And while a coach may help guide them through that process, or in the team sport situations, the technical, tactical decisions made by a coach can affect that. They're very much taking the accountability upon themselves for the result. Where other people may want to place blame, they want to put it on outside circumstances beyond what they did or didn't do. I think that's a huge one. The resiliency, grit, whatever you want to call it, that comes along with that. There's a coach at Cal Rugby named Jack Clark, who's just one of the greatest people to ever exist. He's coached Cal Rugby to, I want to say, 28 of the last 36 national championships. Probably the greatest college sports dynasty in existence. Their team motto is grateful for everything, entitled to nothing, which is a been a real foundational thing for me at Juggernaut. And he spoke at my first track team meeting at Cal when I was a student at Cal. He was our guest speaker, and it stuck with me since then in 2004. But another thing that he talks about is that they have this common glossary for Cal Rugby, who's just, masters of team culture. And in that, they define mental toughness as, making the next, making your next decision being what can keep you moving forward. Essentially, I've misworded it a little bit there, but doing the next most productive thing. That's what it is. So this goes wrong. That's done and over. What's the next thing that we can do to keep us moving forward? We push forward with that. Whatever problem comes up, referee makes bad call, whatever it is in life. What's the next most productive thing that I can do once that event has passed? I think really successful athletes are very good at doing that, rather than I have this injury, just throw my hands up and kind of give up.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say I'd like our listeners to reflect on the first 30 minutes of this podcast now with those in mind and go, whose responsibility was it for fixing Chad's back? What steps were the next ones that he took from that, right? These things relate directly to the story that you told at the front. And we see that with a lot of people, that the expectation is, oh, I've got this. I need to go find somebody that is going to be the person to passively fix it, and it really comes down to you owning that process. And yeah, you're going to find the tools, you're going to find the right people, but yeah, it's your story in the first 30 minutes articulates these 3 points that you were just making here. So I just like our audience to reflect on that for a minute.
Yeah, so I think those, and then in the same vein, and people talk about goal orientation versus process orientation. I heard it phrased in a way that I really liked by a gentleman named Alex Hormozy. Who's like this great business man. He's also super jacked, so that people may know him from that flannel shirt, funny mustache guy.
I'll shoot this over to him.
Yeah. When he says the work is the reward, and I think that athletes who can bring that mindset to it, that what they're doing, that they're taking really joy in what they're doing every day. Not that it's always fun, but that they're taking joy and pride in the way that they're doing it, and not just a means to an end at a competition. And this is something that I don't think did a great job of through a lot of my competitive career, whether that was track and field, powerlifting, strongman, powerlifting, jiu-jitsu, but just where I was all like, this is all just for this one day or this
one day, yeah.
But
instead of, this is what I get to do, and this is what I'm doing with my life. And that's really freaking awesome because it's what I want to do. Yeah. And it's hard. It's times it's really hard, but it's what I choose to be hard. You know, it's life's going to be hard no matter what the fuck you choose. And the fact that we get to choose where it's hard, we shouldn't be complaining about that. We should be celebrating that.
I had to that effect kind of, I had someone comment on my comeback meet type of video, not sure why you'd want to pull heavy after that. You shouldn't focus on that anymore. And honestly, I thought the same thing for myself for a long time. And it kind of just became a thing of I'm going to do this because I can. I'm going to do this so I can see if I can do it. And that was really the goal. Because at the end, it's I'm just going to sit here and just wait to fucking die. I gotta do it.
Yeah.
What was the point of any power, any of the lifting, training, whatever? It's I'm not paying my mortgage because I squatted, X number of pounds. I was doing it to see if I could do it. And
that's how I paid my mortgage. Did that, and every week I'd come squat and cha-ching, a check would show up in the mail the next day, and it's fuck, I got to get back there and do that again.
That is the glorious life of a pro powerlifter.
That's right.
Yeah.
brings in the change, baby. Now, we're getting close to wrapping up, so I want to make sure we hit a couple really important things. So, first is practical takeaways from the discussion today, and second is your favorite top 3 movie quotes.
All right. So the practical takeaways, I suppose, are to those effects of those last few points. But if you're coming back from injury, a little on the slow side is better than a little too fast. Give yourself graded exposure to what you're trying to get back to. Track your training, track every aspect that you can, training and all the stressors, because they all matter. Have fun with it along the way. Don't let it define you. Just be a piece of what you're doing. Top 3 movie quotes. Well, I speak in almost all movie and television references to Marissa. She sometimes gets them, but just quotes. That's really on the spot there.
Does she? By the way, does she ever get upset because I see you doing videos with your assistants, and you're always awfully handsy with it. So does your girl? Oh wait, it's the same. This time.
Yeah. Let's see. Can't believe I'm at such a loss here. I mean,
there's
just so many like Will Ferrell quotes or Wedding Crashers. Like, you son of a bitch, you sailor, you.
That'll work. Top 3, putting you on the spot for 3 quotes was quite the challenge. But knowing your TV and movie addiction for good comedy, I had to reach out. That one will work.
Just the entirety of seasons 1 through 3, Arrested Development.
Oh my!
From there, like I was listening to a Joe Rogan clip yesterday, and he was interviewing this lady. She was talking about bees, and like how bees are so important to the world, like ecosystem and pollinating and all this stuff. And all I could think of it was Joe Bluth saying, "Bees, beads, bees," and if you got that one, that's a pretty deep cut.
There's so many good lines from that show. Yeah. Oh my god! I had my cat. I found this cat one time. So random tangent. It was a stray, and I wasn't sure. We put up signs in the neighborhood, so I wasn't sure if we were going to keep it or not. So it was named Maybe. So,
we were at a golf tournament last year and ran into Will Arnett there, and I was we had like a pretty cush setup there, so the open bar aspect of it, I was pretty drunk, and I may have done the chicken dance, the cock, cock, cock.
Oh my god! Oh my god.
Chicken dance. That was kind of off to the side. It wasn't like to him. I'm sure he noticed it and just was like, "I'm not even going to acknowledge this."
Yeah,
idiot.
not even. I don't even want to be engaged in this right now. But oh my god, that's a moment of gold.
Yeah. And then after, when we went to take a picture with him, this is after I was doing the dance off to the side, I apologized. I said, "Sorry, I made a huge, tiny mistake," and that a giggle. So,
love it. Well, I definitely want to have you on again, Chad. There's so much pieces of the conversation that I'd love to dive into, especially in this like post-competitive phase, and a few other things, and psychology around a lot of this. So, but I think we got some amazing content today. And where can people find you? Where's the best places to find you at?
Yeah, so at Juggernaut Training, at Chad Wesley Smith on Instagram, the Juggernaut AI app in all your app stores, or at juggernautai.app, juggernautbjj.app, juggernautbjj app in the app stores. So the websites, jtsstrength.com, Juggernaut Training Systems YouTube channel, all those places in there. You can find
Awesome.
me at Gracie Baja headquarters 2 to 3 nights a week if you want to pajama wrestle.
Nice.
So all that stuff's going to be linked up in the show notes, guys. Definitely make sure you go give him a follow. Check out what he's doing. He's putting out a lot of great content. He's got tons of ebooks, tons of educational curriculum. So, yeah.
Yep. Thanks again. Say hi to Marissa. And also fantastic to see that you picked up the training wizard on your team, too. So, Mr. Sin. So, congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thanks. All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good
Take
one.
care, man.